About 2 months ago, I saw the video game Night Trap for the first time. It is a sick, disgusting video game, in my judgment.
So you're a big fan of Dana Plato and ski masks, but you don't really want the hassle of robbing a video store in Nevada? Well, my friend, you're in luck because there's a video game called Night Trap. Night Trap is a 1992 release for the SegaCD. For the review, I'll be using the CD32X version. It's the same game, except the video is a lot cleaner, not to mention larger. Plus, the map and room select buttons look a whole lot better. Although this is a 1992 release, most of the footage was filmed in 1987. Night Trap was originally made for a video cassette-based game system by Hasbro called the Nemo. This system was never released, so executive producer Tom Zito purchased the material for this game and another game titled Sewer Shark and started his own company, Digital Pictures. In retrospect, this seems a little obvious. I mean, look at the clothes the actors are wearing. It looks like The Cosby Show instead of Saved by the Bell. Moreover, just listen to the theme song. It's a song I put in at the beginning of this review. It just screams the late 1980s. That song makes me want to dust off my denim jacket, blast REO's Speedwagon while driving around in my Pontiac. Oh, REO's Speedwagon, even after all these years, I just keep on loving you. I originally bought this game because it's often listed as one of the worst video games ever made. I wanted to see if it was really that bad, but surprisingly, I had a lot of fun playing this. In fact, I had a blast playing it. I have a feeling that most people who think this is one of the worst games ever made are just missing its charm. From a technical standpoint, the game is made really well. It's not horribly programmed. In fact, it's one of the last games programmed by the fantastic David Crane. He's the person responsible for such iconic games as Pitfall. There are plenty worse in this game. Let's just say there's a lot of distance between this game and a virtually unplayable game such as Superman 64. The bottom line is this game is not for everybody. Night Trap is a game for people who like B-movies. Because Night Trap is a B-movie. The basic plot is that you're in charge of monitoring and protecting a group of girls while they are in a lake house. You're given this job because a group who was in the lake house before went missing. Luckily, the entire house has been Macaulay Culkin'd, and you're in the driver's seat. And that's it, that's the plot. But the game is full of camp and charm that will appeal to a certain type of person. If you were like me and you and your friends used to find the most terrible looking horror movies to marathon all night, this game is for you. I, for one, love bad horror movies. And this movie has some of the scenes that just absolutely appeal to me. There's a scene where the girls find homemade cherry popsicles in the refrigerator that just scratches that bad movie itch. But the plot, setting, and campiness of Night Trap is probably its biggest drawback. This makes it a niche game. But then the gameplay also makes it a niche game. This game has to be played with pen and paper. The gameplay is about exploration. There's over 40 minutes of video in the game, and it only takes about 25 minutes to complete. This means it is not meant to be completed in one sitting. You slowly see more of the cinematics with multiple playthroughs. During this time, the player is expected to be making a table of locations and times to set traps. The game even provides a popping sound as an audio indicator for when traps are supposed to be set. This leaves it up to you to find the locations and record them in a table. To some players, this will just sound like a chore, but to some people, this is fantastic. I, for one, love this type of game. It reminds me of all of the fun I had making hand maps of the dungeons in Phantasy Star for the Master System. So let's just go ahead and talk about what everybody knows about Night Trap and what it's famous for. This, more than any other game, was viewed as being so indecent that it helped create the ESRB rating system. Now this is a scene that caused all the fuss. In retrospect, it's not that bad. It's just another example of things being blown way out of proportion. But I mean, honestly, just listen to what politicians were saying about this game.
Night Trap are not the kind of gifts that responsible parents give. Night Trap, which adds a new dimension of violence specifically targeted against women, is especially repugnant. It ought to be taken off the market entirely.
But the game was influential even beyond that. Think about the type of games being released in 1987, or even 1992. Cheesiness aside, this game was groundbreaking in terms of narrative. It attempted to bring the cinematic experience into a video game. This was achieved using QuickTime events, for a story that's linear, and for situations where gameplay would just get really complicated. QuickTime events are not a bad way to go. It can create involvement in an otherwise passive experience, and this is a technique that is still used today. Sure, modern games have refined the formula a fair amount, but the basic mechanic remains the same. Modern classics such as Indigo Prophecy, and let's be honest here, some modern, critically acclaimed games have used QuickTime events very successfully as a storytelling device. They may be more complicated and refined, but they still use the same basic mechanics as Night Trap. But, all this aside, Night Trap is a niche game. It's not for everybody. Just don't make the common mistake and confuse this with being bad. Now, I'm not saying it's great. It is one of the better FMV games, but most of the FMV games were not good. They were just very early products and experiments with bringing cinema into gaming, and they suffered due to their infancy. But that doesn't take away from the campy charm Night Trap has. So for the bottom line on the review, I'd give the game a C+. As mentioned before, Night Trap is average. I'd actually call it above average, but for a certain group of people, this would actually be a great game. To me, Night Trap seems like the marriage of early adventure games such as Maniac Mansion and campy horror movies such as Cabin in the Woods. If that combination sounds appealing to you, give this game a shot. Although it's not one of the best games in my collection, it is one of my favorite games in my collection.
I think you like Takes control. You just saved my life. And you were very good. You saved all my friends. Trapped most of the Oggs. I'll bet with a little practice you could be perfect.
How would you like to have a teenage daughter go out on a date with someone who's just watched or played 3 hours of that game?